Can a genius mind bring the rise and downfall of a man? A born mathematical genius, John Forbes Nash Jr. had his promising career come to a halt at the age of 30 when his talented mind suddenly turned against him. Separating reality and fiction became the daily struggle as Nash's mind spiraled into the complicated world of schizophrenia.
John Nash started his life in a normal setting, Bluefield, West Virginia, to John Nash Sr. and Margaret Virginia Martin. Bluefield was a coal mining town where John Sr. worked at an electrical utility company called the Appalachian Electric Power Company. As a veteran of World War I, he worked hard, saved money, and was focused on providing for his family. Margaret was social and outgoing, and she was a teacher of English and Latin until she married John Nash Sr. They both enjoyed social events and were eager to find a strong place in the town's social pyramid. They welcomed John Nash Jr. on June 13, 1928, whom they called Johnny. A few years later, their younger daughter, Martha, was born.
Nash's parents noticed that he had some unusual qualities as a child. Young Johnny taught himself to read at the age of 4, he stayed indoors, and he always played by himself. His parents were very persistent to try to get Nash to socialize with other kids. They even urged Martha to include him in her activities with her friends, but he was always the odd one out. As he grew up, Johnny played very harsh pranks on not just kids but adults. For example, he and his 2 acquaintances created bombs and an explosion almost killed one of the kids in the group. Growing up, John continued to struggle with interacting with people and his actions remained very immature. His classmates throughout school and college continued to be very skeptical of him and often described his actions as a 12-year-old well into his 20s.
At school, Nash had a hard time socially and academically. He struggled with music and, surprisingly, math. He had a hard time staying focused. He daydreamed, had sloppy handwriting, and did most of the tasks his way and not the teacher's way. His mother made him enroll in penmanship classes, and he was really bored with it, and he made no effort to improve. His first inspiration for math occurred when he read the book Men of Mathematics by E.T. Bells. For the first time, he viewed math as fun, and the book captured his imagination. His social awkwardness continued to haunt Nash throughout school. He was always teased by other classmates and was excluded from most social groups. During high school, Nash made an effort and helped struggling students with schoolwork. This gained him some much-needed peer recognition.
Once he graduated, he went to Carnegie Institute of Technology like his father to become an engineer. It didn't work out for him because he struggled with mechanical drawing. The second semester, he took a shot at chemistry, which also backfired. He struggled with laboratory work and following directions. He was urged by a man named John Millington Synge, who had recognized Nash's talents in the field of mathematics. Here he began to have accomplishments, and by age 19, Nash was able to solve most difficult math problems and outmathed his teachers. He was involved in many mathematical competitions but always lost, and that always bothered him. He jokingly downplayed the importance of the competitions but always tried to win the next one. His path was set in the field of mathematics as Professor R.L. Dufflin wrote the short recommendation, "This man is a genius." While he was at Carnegie Tech, World War II had broken out and Nash became obsessed with safety. He started to create codes and break them.
Nash went to Princeton in 1948 at the age of 20. Princeton was the best place to be for a mathematician. Most up-and-coming mathematicians, many from Europe, either taught or attended at Princeton. The staff and student were the elite of the mathematics, where math was in every part of the university. As Harold Bohr stated, that the university contained classes, yes, but everyone was required to come and have tea together. These daily teas were full of academic discourses in a casual setting. Nash rarely attended classes, hardly if ever opened a book. He, however, would question the professors endlessly at teas, and attended all visiting lecturers as he took copious notes on a clipboard. Solomon Lefschetz, a professor at Princeton, was an inspiration to Nash. He encouraged Nash to explore all aspects of math and would listen to his ideas. During Nash's first year at Princeton, he seemed even weirder than everyone else. His appearance was unusual. While he was tall and built like an athlete, he walked at an odd pace, hugging his knapsack in front of him. He almost always avoided eye contact, and his greetings were often awkward. He tried to prove how much smarter he was than all the other students and professors, which gave him an air of arrogance. He wanted to get noticed all the time. It was negative and sarcastic towards other people. He used words such as hacker, which describes a non-worker, called things trivial to show his distaste, accused others of talking barble in his arguments, and discredited so-and-so of their achievements. He always bragged about his own accomplishments. His fellow students quickly developed ways to avoid Nash. One easy way was smoking around him, which always annoyed Nash and encouraged him to leave.
At Princeton, Nash's biggest accomplishment was a 27-page thesis on the theory of games, which only took him 6 weeks to write. Game theory was not a new field in math, but Nash changed the formula and combined pure math with economics, later on even in physics. In his thesis, he described interactions between people, listing all the possible solutions between two people or groups. A possible outcome could be estimated using the Nash equilibrium. His math was pure and simple and solidified his place in the field of mathematics. After college, Nash worked for a corporation called RAND, which is a group of civilian mathematicians, engineers, and scientists who worked on an Air Force contracts during World War II and the following Cold War. Many new technological advances were made in the military, such as radar, sonar, infrared, and atomic bombs. Military matters became so complex that these specialists were needed to develop user-friendly systems for the military. Nash worked in the theoretical math department. While at low-level clearance, he was aware of many secretive rooms at RAND, high levels of security, many soldiers walking around, and a sense of urgency that bordered paranoia. The Cold War was in full force. Shortly after Nash started working at RAND, news broke that Russia had developed the A-bomb. All efforts at RAND intensified, scrutiny increased, and Nash became even more obsessed with safety and codes. While at RAND, Nash solved the problem for interactions between non-interest-bearing people. He called it the bargain problem. While many other mathematicians tried to come up for a system of interactions between non-friendly people or nations, Nash developed a simple formula to predict possible outcomes. This was his last major contribution to the game theory. Upon returning to Princeton, the Korean War loomed over America and Nash was still eligible to be drafted. With help of RAND and Princeton staff, he filed for occupational deferment. He moved his efforts into algebra and published his work on algebraic manifolds in 1957. Again, his math was pure and simple, and he managed to get further recognition from mathematicians.
Years of conflict with co-workers, students, and professors finally cost Nash a position at Princeton. He was not offered an assistant professorship, mostly due to his abrasive personality and inability to teach and get along with students. Moving on, at age 23, Nash became the youngest instructor at MIT. His lectures were scattered and unstructured. He did not care if his students learned anything or not. He was demanding, off-topic, and taught far too advanced materials for undergraduate classes. Forever pranking and pushing his students to frustration, one day notes were found on the MIT blackboard stating, "This is Hate John Nash Day." While at MIT for 7 years, Nash took on a more non-conventional persona. He became increasingly eccentric and strange. He started to refer to people as humanoids, he made outrageous statements, and began showing signs of separating from conventional society and becoming disconnected from the world. Nash's romantic life was equally disjointed. He often made passes towards men and women. His escapades cost him his RAND clearance when he was arrested for picking up a young man in the men's bathroom. He also kept his affair with a woman secret for 4 years, even though his first son resulted from the relationship. He remained selfish and inconsistent in his relationships. When he met someone he could confide in, he remained one-sided and overbearing. When he met his future wife, Alicia, at MIT, he finally found the girl with the correct intelligence, breeding, and looks. Alicia's dream to become the next Marie Curie did not survive the academic rigor of MIT. She liked Nash's intelligence, possible future accomplishments, and looks. Nash found Alicia to be interesting in company. She was easy to talk with for extended periods of time. Her symmetrical features, social ease, clever wit, and aristocratic lineage made the package complete in Nash's eyes. They married February 1957.
Nash was now 30 years old, married, and he was about to be featured in Fortune magazine as an up-and-coming star of mathematics. He was hoping to win the coveted Fields Medal. This would be his last year to do so. He worked for a year on elliptical equations, published a paper that was sure to win the award. A much less-known mathematician, Ennio de Giorgi in Italy, published a paper on the same topic just months before. Nash's last chance for the award slipped by. When Nash found out about de Giorgi, he was furious. He also had a disagreement with Oppenheimer about quantum theory. His obsession with patterns led him to attempt to resolve contradictions in quantum theory. He later admitted this sudden overreaching across disciplines may have destabilized his mental wellness, sparking a battle with mental illness that lasted for the next 3 decades.
Episodes of self-doubt, dissatisfaction, and regret alternated with anticipation and feelings of greatness dogged Nash's 30th year. A sudden onset of anxiety about the end of his perceived creative years. Nash became obsessed with age and began taking many risks. Nash set out to solve all the outstanding problems of mathematics. First was solving the Riemann hypothesis about calculating prime numbers. He also became obsessed with patterns in the stock market and hoped to become rich. He planned out a grand design for his life. In 1959, his mental illness took hold. His behavior became increasingly flamboyant and random, admitting failures in stock speculations, being unable to keep up with his co-workers, and dealing with the thought of his growing family sent Nash searching for control. He looked for encrypted messages in the New York Times. He told people abstract powers from outer space are communicating with him. There seemed to be a pattern of men with red neckties following him around the MIT campus, and he could hear people talking about him at parties. By February of that year, he wrote a letter to Claude Berge in Paris that his career was being ruined by aliens. Strange letters were being drafted by Nash, addressed to ambassadors in different countries.
The final letter that shone a light on Nash's mental status came with a letter declining a seminar because he was to become the Emperor of Antarctica on the same date. Later on in the year, he missed another lecture because he couldn't find his way to Yale. At home, he became convinced that the much-pregnant Alicia was keeping secrets from him, and the house was bugged. By Easter, Alicia had to seek medical treatment for her husband because his behavior became threatening and erratic towards her. Once Nash was institutionalized, he sought to divorce his wife. Through observations led to a diagnosis of paranoid schizophrenia for Nash with elaborate and grandiose hallucinations, suspicious, guarded behavior, and extreme detachment in his voice. Part of the treatment was to make Nash more social. Then belief of the time was that a person cannot be social and crazy at the same time. Staff was overly friendly and supportive, and visitors were always welcomed. Possibly to get out faster, Nash had a speedy recovery. Upon his release, the pregnant Alicia moved out and focused on getting Nash healthy. Careful not to talk about the baby or anything personal, she focused only on her husband during visits. The day after the baby was born, Nash's hospital visit was accusatory and strained. Suspicious of Alicia and MIT, he resigned and took the first job offer in Paris, France. While in France, he traveled to Luxembourg, where he tried to renounce his American citizenship. Slowly, his frustration turned into depression that lasted for months.
By 1960, he returned to Princeton firmly in the grip of his mental illness for 2 years. He appeared a shell of his former self. He talked to squirrels, made a scrapbook called Absolute Zero. His letter writing continued, and he was generally avoided by the students and staff. Over the next 2 decades, several treatments and hospitalizations left Nash with gaps in his memory and the dulling of his cognitive capability. He moved back and forth from Europe to America, always worried about the government controlling his brain and forever noticing secret patterns and codes meant only for him. Insulin treatments and antipsychotic medications only slowed down Nash's ability to work. By 1970s, he went back to Princeton, and he was known as the Phantom of Fine Hall. His old school functioned as a therapeutic community. Here he felt safe and respected. While many students called him the mad genius of Firestone and the library's crazy man, some found him interesting and helpful. In 1990, Peter Sarnak joined the faculty at Princeton. He found mutual interest in the Riemann hypothesis with Nash. Sarnak found Nash lucid and full of insight. Others agreed that Nash had improved over time. In fact, he seemed to be in remission, possibly due to hormonal changes due to aging, possibly due to his high intelligence or years of safety at Princeton. Nash slowly became symptom-free.
While he remained in obscurity, his game theory continued to gain recognition. In the field of economics, the Nash equilibrium continued to gain momentum, and by 1987, it was a solid part of economic theory. The oversight in recognizing his contribution was corrected in 1990 when he was nominated for membership in the Econometrics Society. Around this time, Ariel Rubinstein wrote a 10-page report on potential candidates for the Nobel Peace Prize. Nash was on the top of the list. It took several years to the process, but finally Nash was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize in 1994. Nash's name has been appearing for a Nobel since the mid-80s. Economics was not a popular field for the Nobel Prize. Over the decades, Nash's game theory has opened up a field of thought in economics that over time changed the world. Nash's life came full circle. He had achieved the highest levels of mathematics at a young age. The tragedy of mental illness haunted him for 30 years and almost destroyed his academic and family life. Amazingly, his wife remained supportive of him as much as possible. She raised his 2 sons and was at his side in 1994 as he became a Nobel laureate, the final triumph and recognition that Nash has been seeking all his life. The movie, A Beautiful Mind, released in 2001, told Nash's story to large audiences, and his years until his sudden death in 2015 were spent as a mathematical celebrity. In the end, John Nash Jr. got the recognition he craved.